capstone concept for my final year called Sonidify XR, the Gramophone. I want to give you a little background before showing you the idea to really tell you how I arrived to this concept during fall 2023. As many of you guys are aware, my passion beyond design lies in the music industry, and I aspire to work as a designer for any company that deals with music. So my original idea was to create my own music application for streaming, right? Because I've been trying to get into music streaming companies for a while. I haven't been unsuccessful, so I wanted to just do my own thing, but innovate on the experience by introducing more emergent technology, perhaps augmented reality, location-based playlists, which were the ideas that I have been carrying with me since the beginning of my graduate experience here at the University of Miami. I did some research, and I wanted to also create an experience that could help underplay artists, underground artists. So I was going to use a music API and just filter songs that had less than 100 plays or so that the people that were experiencing my application were going to be fed new music that they hadn't heard before. So I was trying to tackle that as well as explore new ways to present music to people, which is, I presented perhaps wearables, pitching music, like I said, based on underplay artists first, showing music by lyrics, etc. So I looked into all these different sides to see where I could innovate. And while my idea was innovative on its own, it was too much for one person, which is a one-person team for spring 2024 to accomplish. So I had to go back to the drawing board. This is some of the research that I did. I framed my concept. I did different Hamawi questions to really see what I could tackle. I looked at precedents to because my goal was to do something in the music world, something with music playback, but as a UX designer, right, really show the skills that I've learned here in the program. And my first idea was not going to work out. Um, this was my original problem statement. As I said before, how I could innovate on music streaming, how I could help underplay artists, and then also introduce location-based playlists, which would work more on an organic kind of algorithm. So like each location would have different songs that users added, but in order for them to add it, they had to leave. In order for them to get music, they had to leave one. So like every time a new person went into that playlist, it was going to be brand new music. So that was my approach. Um, as I said before, my idea was not novel enough for a capstone concept. It was too much work and it was too broad. So I had to scope down, pivot, and just time for idea two, uh, which was another one of my passions. I've always been interested in the music, in history of music technology. I myself used to own an iPod in the 2000s growing up, so but I never knew what it was like to have like a vinyl record, right? Like I've played with cassettes before, and then I wanted to kind of explore that in like a video game or a VR experience. I wanted to take users to learn about the history of music technology and how innovation in the music industry kind of evolved at the same time. Right now we have music streaming, which we take for granted the billions of songs that we have in our fingertips, but it wasn't always that way. Music used to be consumed differently. You need to have like physical media and analog devices to really create that playback. So, and this was my original idea: create a sort of like virtual gallery, which different stations that would start from like in the invention of the phonograph, in the all the way through the 20th century. So going through different decades, how like the radio records eventually turned into cassette players, like that. The music industry kind of shifted gears, and after that, we landed in CDs, MP3 players, and so on and so forth, until we find ourselves now with music streaming. So with giants like Spotify and Apple Music, of course, dominated the industry. I wanted to do something for like younger audiences because they will probably never understand what it was like to live during those times when music was used to be consumed differently. And I wanted to do an educational experience where they could again learn about historical context of each innovation, learn how it worked, and learn how each one kind of inspired the next one, right? I presented my idea to the class several times. I did some research, and then eventually my idea was too broad for my capstone project. Once again, in a spring semester, I needed to focus on like a smaller scope. So I chose to start with the gramophone. I want to kind of educate people into the debate of like analog sound versus digital sound. Some people choose one over the other. Uh, and again, I know it's never going to be the same as using an actual device, but the beauty about virtual reality is that you can amplify the experience by simulating time travel, right? So aside from people interacting with the device, I wanted to kind of teleport them back in time to each specific era. In this case, I will start with one of the devices and just kind of take them to like the early 20th century, like the 1900s, 1910s, 1920s, etc. And that's something that only can be done in VR, right? I did some additional research, right? Kind of in the beginning choosing whether I wanted to do video game because wanted to challenge myself beyond just traditional apps and websites. I know I'm a UX designer, but I'm also really enthusiastic about other form or other media, VR, AR, you name it. And so I went and looked into my possibilities, right? How much music I wanted to have, like what did I want to teach people and how. I decided to choose VR just because it's something I don't have much experience in, which means this is a perfect opportunity for me to grow with this medium. I looked into different precedents. And I'm really inspired by the Museum of African American Culture and how it's not a traditional like white walls type of gallery where you go and just read info panels. They actually have physical objects that you can interact with. Like for example, this one where you go inside the bus and kind of learn more like what it was like to sit in the back of the bus during those difficult times in history. Another one of the presents I looked at is the Disney's Carousel Progress, which again is not really a VR experience; it's a physical one, but they kind of educate you through like how technology has evolved through time. I'm really passionate about that topic, so I'm going to be starting with the first portable invention of music, which is the gramophone. And this is my week question. So, how might we create an educational experience for younger individuals by showing them the inner workings of the gramophone, highlighting the impact that the device had on the music industry, and taking them through several scenes that really show how this technology affected everyday life, affected social life, and eventually, at what point in history did music evolve to cassettes, right, or like the next big innovation? But it all started somewhere, and really that's where I want to show my users some statistics, right? So recently, I know there's been a vinyl records resurgence for many years now, but it's never been the same as back in like the 20s, 10s, because now we have all these options to consume music. Nowadays, younger audiences like to purchase and collect records for the aesthetic of it mainly. They might not necessarily understand how they work or like where everything started. Um, which is really why I want to have something that is meaningful. It's fun to interact, but also teaches them, right? Like this is a vinyl record. It's not just something you can put on a wall for aesthetic purposes. Like at some point, this was the only way people could listen to music, and it really was a special feeling that to go through all those micro interactions. Um, and then going back to like the ongoing debate, I personally, since I consider myself a huge fan of music, which but I really don't have a preference. But I know some people say that analog is better than digital. For there's pros and cons. So my focus is going to be in this case analog, um, because digital is basically music streaming, right? So um, that's what I want to tackle during my project. And I know I'm going to be dealing with a VR headset, which means it's going to be digital sound, but there can be filters and um, other manipulations that I can do to like replicate the analog sound as best as possible. And my idea is going to be Sonidify XR, the gramophone. Um, it's basically an experience where the player, interacts, learns about the history of the device, learns about all the micro interactions, and using special records, they can, which are keys to unlock different scenes, they can be teleported back in time where, where life was much simpler. So think about scenes like where people were gathering around a gramophone or a radio to like listen to music, and how special that was. Or in a recording studio where back then everybody had to be in the same room for the performance, and they had to get it right, in order for the master recording to be perfect, right? There was no digital manipulation, there was no electricity kind of power in these devices. These were mechanical devices that work with gears, and it was a breakthrough back then. So I really want to take the player back to that time. I may or may not use different like filters, so I could do color or black and white filters to really replicate that vintage aesthetic. But again, throughout the experience, the player is gonna learn how, like, all the different steps that go into setting up a record, what happens when you do it wrong, the different materials the records came in, and how like this impacted everyday life, right? So like how it revolutionized the world. And this is again aside from all that different interact, all the educational value that I'm bringing with my idea. um, I've been going on I've been doing user research, and some of the insights that I've been gathering is that people want to know exactly how these devices without electricity, how they were able to like work and produce sound through the horn, right? So like this is a perfect opportunity for me to take them inside the gramophone. So I think of like shrinking them, and they go inside, and they hover on different objects to learn the names of the most important parts, and how eventually the gears create that rotation, and the needle that's placed on top of the record, and it translates all the vibrations and amplifies them through the horn into what we hear, as music. And I think this is something that you can only do in extended reality. So in VR, I think it's a perfect medium for my idea. Something that not even a video game could have been replicated, even if you had been a first-person experience. Um, the goals of my project are to educate people. I want to teach people how valuable this technology was, how impactful it was. But I also want them to enjoy the process, right? So I'm gonna have music playback, classical music, opera, whatever that was relevant back then. And I also want to inspire an appreciation for music. So perhaps this is not only for music fans, but like for engineers, for this could potentially be used in classrooms for to teach people, right? Children, younger people that are used to everything digital. So I feel like this idea has a lot of potential. And of course, for people that enjoy history like myself as well, this could be something that can tackle all of these different elements. And as I said earlier, my target audience is younger people, so 25 and below. um, People that enjoy learning by doing, people that are very tech savvy, people that like fast interactions but love history as well. Um, and just to kind of go over again into my precedents. So I got the idea to shrink the player and take them inside the gramophone by this idea called the Museum of Other Realities, right? So this one consists of people doing paintings and artworks, and the characters in the VR experience, they can kind of select and like be taken into the painting or that sculpture, and that becomes its own world. So I think that's really forward thinking and innovative way to immerse the player and make them have fun. There's other music, precedents that have been going in VR, which are, for music creation. In my case, it's about music consumption. Um, and of course, like, teaching the how history teaching sorry technological advancements through history, which is something that Distance Carousel Progress does. As I said before, some of the example scenes that I want to have are people in a recording studio, so the player would learn how music used to be recorded back then. That was the only way to do it, and how like social life was impacted by this device. I want to take them into like a record store so they could see what it was like to look for the records, purchase them, like really learn picking them up, taking them in out of the sleeve, and just really going through that whole experience that almost felt like a ritual. And of course, how another scene I want to have like an American family, being brought together by music and just kind of socializing and enjoying the moment, with the gramophone being right like the common denominator. I chose to do this with Unity Interaction Toolkit, and I'm going to be using the MetaQuest 3, which just came out, because I want to prioritize VR controllers for the haptic feedback, but I want to also explore, like, for users that prefer to do hand tracking, I really want to explore having both options. Um, but so the X-ray iteration toolkit will allow me to do this seamlessly, and also I want my application to not only work on Oculus, MetaQuest, but be on any headset available. If I want to pitch this idea, take it further. The development time, so I have everything mapped out, very itemized by weekly, milestones. I'm gonna do some additional research in the beginning of the semester, talking to people beyond what I already want to pitch. Like, what do they expect in a VR experience? Like, if you could time travel to the 20s to the 30s, like, what would they like to learn? How would they like to interact? So this is gonna help me do some primary research. For secondary research, I've been watching endless YouTube videos of people using gramophones, Google searching. So this has been really a really important part for me, like something new, that I had never really understood how these things work. So I'm really enjoying the process. For the remaining of the weeks, week 4 to week 8, I'm going to be designing. So, choosing all my models for the scenes, creating a style guide, getting those voice clips, because I want to have not only information panels, I want to have like voice clips as well, like a narrated experience. Um, Also, I would love to collaborate with the School of Music students. So if they can give me any original orchestra or classical style compositions, I would love to use them. And if I have time, I also want to work on like what happened after the record players, right? So like eventually we landed in the 1950s, 60s, and the cassette player came, and it revolutionized the music industry once again. So I will create a second part called Sonidify XR cassette player, and focus on like people interacting with a Walkman, etc. But once I finish my main project, I would love to have time to do that. And that kind of shows you how I'm basically breaking down my original idea of a music gallery. I'm going through different decades, but I have to start with the gramophone first, get that working, and that is going to be the foundation for everything else. And yeah, so if I'm gonna show you some example screens of my timesheets, my weekly sheets, that I created like a very itemized list of what I want to do every week, and track the status, so I can really keep myself accountable and organized. These are just some examples of things that I already planned out for all the weeks, going all the way up to week 15. Again, I'm gonna skip some of them for time purposes, but this kind of shows you how I have everything planned out well. And I've accommodated for a buffer time in case anything goes wrong and I have to pivot. And that concludes my capstone presentation proposal called Sonidify XR Gramophone. I really thank you guys for your time, for watching, and look forward to starting my idea. Thank you.